So I can start, can I?
You're ready to start the meeting, yes?
Yeah, fine, right. Well, this is our third meeting, so I don't think I need to do a long dissertation first. For the benefit of members of the public who don't know me, it's Councillor Sutcliffe and I'm chairing the meeting today. Legal advice to this meeting is going to come from Mr. Alex Strickland, who normally sits on my left, but is now in his office in Liverpool. And in terms of presenting the applications, it will be Mr. Watson. I can't see him, but presumably he's there somewhere. And then finally, Mrs. Vicky Davis from Democratic Services, whose role is to take the minutes, to advise me on any procedural matters that arise, to monitor the recording. And since we're on Zoom this afternoon, first job perhaps is to take a roll call of members. So if you're ready, Mrs. Davis, perhaps we should proceed with that item now.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll just call everybody's name out, and if you could just indicate that you're present, please. Obviously, there's yourself, Chairman, so you're present. Councillor Brockbank.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Harbron. No? Okay. Now we've got apologies, Chairman, from Councillors Heseltine and Liss, and substitute members are Handley and Soloway. So I'll
Sorry, who and Soloway? I was advised of Soloway by telephone before the meeting.
Councillor Handley is subbing for
Councillor
Liss. Yeah. Councillor Morell.
Present.
Councillor Place.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
Present.
Councillor Rose.
Present.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
Present.
Councillor Welsh.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Handley.
Present.
And Councillor Soloway.
Present.
Thank you. So that just leaves apologies from Councillors Heseltine and Liss, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to the agenda now. We've effectively done item 1. We've covered apologies for absence and substitute. So we're now straight into item 2, confirmation of minutes. Is any member minded to move the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, which was conducted, I wasn't there, it was conducted by Councillor Brockbank.
I do, Chairman. I've notified Councillor Brockbank about my proposal. I hadn't appreciated you were in good health once more, and I apologise for not notifying you in advance. But in the aspect, unfortunately, the minutes of the last meeting aren't numbered, the pages aren't numbered. It relates to the case for Shires Lane at Empsey. It's reference 2019/REM.
Sorry, what page are we on, Councillor Shuttleworth?
The pages aren't numbered, Chairman.
No, they're not for the minutes, are they? So I need the number of the minute.
No, but it's that we had last week.
Lost your voice.
Are you happy? Are you happy for me to continue?
Yes, please do.
Oh, thank you. Right. Yes, I suggest a change to the recommended conditions. It's recommended condition number 3 by deletion of the words in the first sentence in accordance with the proposal set out in the approved technical note JBA blah 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 dated January 2020. In fact, that's a contradiction of what the deferment and delegated authority to Mr. Watson was made for, to ensure that those details were satisfactory. I've notified Mrs. Davis about this, and she also confirms that she's happy with that. Mr. Strickland's happy with it. Councillor Brockbank's nodding, so presumably she recalls the case and is also nodding. I rest my case unless someone wishes to contradict me.
Well, it seems that they're all happy, so can I take that as acceptable, Vicky? Yes, right. Everybody seconding. Are you moving approval of the minutes with that amendment?
Yes, Chairman, I move approval with that amendment.
Do we have a
yes.
seconder for that? Councillor Pringle, you got your hand up.
Yes, please, if I could say something about the minutes, please.
Yes.
I'd like to make a formal request that we have a full transcript of what was said at the last meeting, because this is likely to go before a peer review. And it could possibly also go before the Standards Committee if my self-referral goes any further. Rather than have me being accused of saying things that aren't true, let's have a full and accurate transcript of the minutes so that we know exactly what was said by who and when. Presumably there isn't a member in this House that will object to us having the full evidence made available. It won't cost a lot of money. Somebody will be able to type out a transcript of what was said in a very short period of time. So I would like to move, before we approve the minutes as they stand, that we get a full set of minutes, a transcription. Thank you.
Well, I have to say I would oppose that. I think the recording of the meeting automatically provides what you're seeking, but I would bring in Mrs. Davis at this point because the policy of CGC is not to produce verbatim minutes, I believe. Am I correct, Mrs. Davis?
Yes, Chairman, we don't normally provide verbatim minutes. We just essentially cover the main contents of the report and then the decision that's taken, unless you know, there should be something that a member asks to be recorded, but we definitely don't do verbatim minutes, Chairman. And obviously the recording is available for anybody to listen to from beginning to end.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Strickland got his indicates a wish to speak. Not Councillor Strickland, sorry, Alex Strickland. I'm getting carried away here. I'll come back to you, Richard, in a minute.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that promotion as well. Can I just to underline the point really that Vicky has made, that and indeed yourself has made, that we do not do verbatim minutes. That is not the practice. In fact, that is not the best practice. Legally, we keep a record of what is discussed and the decisions around it. So just to make that point to members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Welsh.
No, I didn't.
Didn't you? All right. Well, Councillor Pringle's got his hand up yet again. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, if that's not the case and we're not happy to have a full set of minutes, I did write to Vicky and ask her to listen to the recording and accurately write down what our solicitor told us about 23 minutes into the tape, when he answered Councillor Brockbank's question basically about whether members and the public had been supplied with all the highway information. And so if Vicky could be kind enough to read out exactly what our solicitor said in response to Councillor Brockbank's question, because basically the question was, should we be determining this application today, given that there are concerns that members of the council and members of the public haven't seen the full highway information. So Vicky, can you please explain what Mr. Strickland said in answer to that question, please?
Are you prepared to do that, Mrs. Davis, or do we bring Mr. Watson in at this point first, maybe?
Well, Chairman, I haven't got that information in front of me. I mean, I can do it at some later point, but I haven't got the transcript of that. But if Alex did want to comment, or Mr. Watson, obviously I can provide that transcript to members by email later, but I haven't got that available at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Councillor Brockbank, I can see you've got a hand up.
Yeah, can I just ask a question of Ms Davis, through you, Chairman? Is the YouTube recording, is that classed as a record, an official record, or is it the written minutes that are the official record? And how long are the recordings kept for? Are they archived? And if they are, how long are they kept for?
Well, I haven't a clue, but I'm sure Mrs Davis will be able to answer that for you, Councillor Brockbank.
Obviously, thank you, Chairman. The signed minutes are the official record, and they are kept permanently as well as the recording, which is also a record. And we do keep that, and it is archived, so it isn't destroyed.
Right, thank you. Mr Strickland, I've got a hand up from you here next, and then I've got Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just provide some clarity, maybe just for the committee on this point. I think that the issue that Councillor Pringle raised on the basis of correspondence that I have seen, and I think the committee has been copied into, I think it relates to the Engine Shed Lane application that was before the previous committee. Whilst I would not want to get into a discussion about a matter which has been previously determined by this committee, the issue appears to relate to the Highways report dated the 1st of June 2020. My information at the time of the committee was that that was on the website. It appears that it was not put on the website until the 24th of July, i.e. after the meeting. But all members were, however, furnished with that information by way of correspondence from the council solicitor through an email dated 17th of July 2020, timed at 14:30. So all members were in possession of that relevant information. And should any members wish to question that at the time, they had the Highways officer before the committee for any clarification. So I just wish to make that point, that members had that information before they took the decision. I hope that's helpful, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Brown, and then I'm going to look for a seconder. We've spent enough time, I think, debating this particular item. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just very briefly, we are obviously just on the factual record, and I would find it helpful just to have that one item that Councillor Pringle's identified recorded in the minutes, or by some other documentary method, if that's the prime record.
I'm sure the Mrs Davis will be pleased to take that on board. Whilst you're speaking, are you minded to second the minutes then?
With that proviso, yes.
Yes, thank you. Right, we've got the minutes now moved and seconded. Do I need to vote on it, Mrs Davis, or can we take that as acceptable?
I think you can take that as acceptable if members can just show their hands or nod their heads or whatever. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay.
Let's move on. We've got a lot of business today. Item 3 is public participation, and I think Councillor Pringle has indicated an intention to ask a question or to raise certain matters in this slot. Now, I take it that Councillor Pringle is the only person that's speaking, is that right?
Yes, Chairman, under item 3.
Okay, well, in that case, the protocol allows me to spend up to 15 minutes on it. So, Councillor Pringle, when you're ready, you can have up to 15 minutes, but hopefully you perhaps won't need all that time. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It certainly won't take 15 minutes. About a month ago, I wrote to our head of planning about the Wyvern Park development, which is a large, important development in Skipton. And I asked him 2 questions, and I copied in 4 or 5 local councillors who also have concerns about what's going on at Wyvern. Sadly, I haven't had a response, so I'd like to ask those 2 questions again today and try to get a response. The first question is quite a simple one. The Wyvern Park development involves housing and industrial units. We are desperately short of industrial units local plan. So this in theory is a good scheme. We actually dropped the affordable housing limit to reflect the fact that this developer was building some industry, which we like. My question to the head of planning was, have we actually managed to tie the developer down so that he can't just build the houses and not do the industrial bit? Or could we not do that? Have we managed to do phasing or something? Or is it possible that the developer will just build the housing, get away with less affordable, and then not do the industry? So that's the first question. And the second question, which is more pertinent, is the scheme at Wyvern was approved before I was a member. And if I'm reading things correctly, this good committee added a condition that HGVs during construction had to come in off a new roundabout on Skipton Bypass rather than coming through town and down Carlton Road. In January this year, the developer put in a planning application to amend that to allow them to come through town to get to the site with the lorries to build the houses and industrial units. 2 or 3 councillors, including myself, kicked up a fuss because we didn't think it was right that that condition was changed. The applicant withdrew the request to change the condition. So, as far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, lorries to build the site are supposed to come in off the bypass. Exactly a month ago, the developer completed a new roundabout on Carlton Road. And he put a big sign up saying, this is the access to this site. Not access for light vehicles. No sign saying we don't want lorries coming in this way, coming off the bypass. In fact, yesterday, I took a picture of lorries driving in through this new access. Now, it's not muddy yet, and it hasn't kicked off on Facebook, but if I'm correct and the lorries are supposed to be coming in off the bypass, wouldn't it be prudent for us as a council to write to the developer, remind him of his obligations and say, we are not happy for you to bring lorries through Skipton, we want you to come in off the bypass, which was what was agreed. So the second question is, am I correct in thinking lorries are supposed to come in off the bypass? If I am, are we going to shut our eyes and let the developer continue to drive in off Carlton Road, or are we actually going to take enforcement action? Because with all due respect, I think this is a scheme that is worthy of enforcement action if the developer is going to flout the rules. Thank you. 2 questions.
All right, thank you for that. Just a personal comment on the first one about the houses. The developer, of course, is Henry Boot Developments. They have a contract with Bellway to build the houses. They will presumably be locked into that contract with whatever composition of affordable houses it may or may not have. Anyway, that's perhaps the minor problem compared with the other points you've raised. So I'll now ask Mr. Watson to come in, and in particular, you're seeking or wanting to seek a reason why you didn't get a reply to your letter at that point in time. I'll take a shrug of the shoulders as a yes there.
No.
Mr. Watson, where are you? You're not on my screen.
I hope I will be now.
Yes, you are indeed.
Right. 2 elements. I can only apologise to Councillor Pringle for not getting a response, but we have had extensive involvement with Henry Boot and the contractors. You're quite right, Chairman. It is a joint development, but Henry Boots are the developers. And there is a commitment via the original planning permission for Wyvern Park to ensure that the infrastructure for the industrial land had to be provided before they could commence any development on the residential element. And it was for precisely the reason that Councillor Pringle's making, is that we didn't want to see a situation where the residential development was built out and the industrial development wasn't delivered. That was a major, major concern of the planning committee, and that is embodied in the legal agreements and indeed the original planning permission. So rest assured, the industrial development will go ahead. It's under construction at the moment. They're putting in the infrastructure works to carry that out. I can't advise members what the timescales are going to be for that particular project, but rest assured the residential development will not commence until the infrastructure is involved. It has been constructed for the delivery of the industrial site. In respect to the traffic movements, obviously the intention, as originally proposed, was that the construction access would take place from the bypass, so that you weren't coming through town to actually build Wyvern Park. And that clearly is the intention. We've had extensive dialogue with via the enforcement team with the developers. There is a practical position on this, though, that you've obviously got to get to the point of being able to actually provide an access, and that is indeed is what's there. It certainly wasn't completed when I was down the Western Bypass late last week. But what members must remember is that one of the primary contractors on this site were Whitelocks. And Whitelocks have their depot on Carlton New Road. And therefore it seems entirely pointless to think that you end up with construction traffic coming from town, from their depot, which exists to the north of the crematorium and cemetery, to ultimately come back into it. So the actual ultimate construction will take place from the bypass, but the practical position is that the contractor has his depot in another position. And on that basis, you're in a situation where you've got to apply some degree of common sense of how do you end up getting the contractors out of their existing yard. The only way they can go is through town to then go onto the bypass. So it was a sort of practical position. And the issue over them wanting to continue, or why they made the application at the time, which goes back to the rather bad weather in February, they wanted to have the ability to continue to get the construction work done with minimal intervention and difficulties. And we've been working very, very hard with them to achieve that end. So yes, there is the issue that if there is any continued breach, we will continue to investigate on the enforcement front. And if action is appropriate, we'll take it. But at this point in time, we've got to get to a situation where the access from the bypass and the roundabout isn't complete yet. It's still work in progress. It still isn't complete yet. But as soon as that is complete, all future construction traffic for the industrial site or indeed the residential site will be via the bypass, not through town.
Thank you for that assurance. Very quickly then, Councillor Pringle, you've got your hand up yet again. Sorry, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Perfect answer to the first question. All tied up. I'm more than happy with that. Not entirely sure I'm happy with the answer to the second question. Yes, Whitelocks do access there, and yes, it makes sense for Whitelocks lorries to continue to use the new Carlton Road access as they always have. But that is not a Whitelocks lorry. It's a clear breach of the planning, and either we're going to take action or we're going to face a lot of abuse on Facebook, and the abuse will be justified. Because if we are going to turn a blind eye to the developer driving HGVs through town to get to this site, when this committee approved a clear condition saying that they shouldn't, then we're making a mistake. Please don't try and confuse me with Whitelocks and who they are and where they are. I'm more than happy for Whitelocks to continue to use their existing entrance. It's the other lorries, and that's not a Whitelocks lorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. I think that sums up on that particular agenda item. So we'll move on now to declarations of interest. We have two applications this afternoon. Has any member an interest to declare in respect of either of them? No, that deals with interests then, but now moving on. Oh, hang on, Councillor Brown is waving to it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a strong enough interest to disbar me from the debate, but my agent in the last election was one of the neighbours on the second application. I've spoken with that neighbour and they're neutral towards the application, so I intend to continue to contribute to the debate.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we leave this particular agenda item, I need to know if anybody has had any lobbying interests in respect of these And I can say for a start that I've been lobbied for the town caravan park application. I've been lobbied to refuse it, Vicky.
To
Now, are there
refuse. Okay,
any other
thank you.
members? Sorry, proceed. Councillor Pringle's got his hand up.
Yes, please. The Tarn House application, I'd like to declare that I have a friend that lives there in one of these permanent log cabins, but I haven't spoken to him for a year. He hasn't lobbied me. And so, like Councillor Brown, I don't think it's enough of an interest to step out of what I think is an important debate. I have been lobbied against the Tarn House application, and I have been lobbied for the Caleb's Barn application. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that conclude lobbying interests for the members? Wait a minute, Councillor Brown's waving a finger at me now.
Yeah, I've been lobbied on the Tarn application against, and I've been lobbied on the Corder Lane one by a member of this committee in favour.
Thank you for that contribution. Well, we'll move on now and we'll finally get to the schedule of plans. The first application, of course, is the Bartington's Caravan Site 1. So, Mr. Watson, when you're ready, perhaps you can present that particular case.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application to allow 12-month holiday occupation of the caravans on Townmoor Caravan Park. It's very simple and short because it's not really about the caravan site itself, it's the actual use. Thank you, Chairman. Members may be familiar with the site because we dealt with an application, was it last year or 2018, to put additional caravans on the site. So that's simply a location plan with an aerial photograph of the site. You can see it's well established, and there is an additional area of development going to take place where I've shown you the cursor, which was granted on appeal. That shows you a plan where there is occupancy conditions or no evidence to show that this subject is subject to a 12-month occupancy condition. The area to the right here is not subject to any controls, and it's the area to the south that is subject to the occupancy condition to restrict occupancy and prevent occupation effectively from the middle of December to the first week of February. The issue with this is that if we take on board other sites within the within Craven District, and indeed if you take a much wider picture of what is happening nationwide, the Planning Inspectorate are consistently allowing appeals for 12-month occupancy, because the real issue and concern is, if it is with a 12-month occupancy, who is to say that someone can't go for a holiday break to Townmoor in December and spend Christmas there, or indeed go in January and spend some of January there? The issue is one not of having a holiday at any time of the year, but the issue underlying this appears to be, which I can't subscribe to, is that this ends up as a residential site rather than a holiday site. And I would just like to remind members that we've got, obviously in the report, model condition that is constantly and frequently used by the Planning Inspectorate. So I can't honestly actually take any credit for the drafting of that model condition. It's not one of mine, it's a Planning Inspector's or the Planning Inspectorate's decision. And the other issue that is important for members to understand is that not only is it controlled by the planning legislation, it's also concerned by the Caravan Sites and Controller Development Act 1960. It goes back a long, long time. But there is a requirement for a site license And I would just like to remind members that the current site licence, which obviously may need to be amended subject to any planning permission that's granted, is that it is for holiday use only. I think there may be a couple of vans on there that are occupied by members of staff who are there for maintenance purposes. The licence obviously reflects the planning permission, and the licence that says at no time shall area 3, which is the area at the bottom here, that's what's referred to as area 3 on the site licence, shall be open for holiday use between the 15th of December and the 6th of February. So depending on the deliberations by members today, obviously the site licence will need to be revised and amended. But I do want to impress on members the fact that the Planning Inspectorate have taken a view over many years now that it's not inappropriate, or it is inappropriate to prevent people taking a holiday in December or January, and that simply reflects what I'll call the industry norm as it is now across the entire countryside. So the recommendation before you this afternoon, Chairman, is to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll be back to the normal screen now, yes. Following the normal format, we do, I believe, have a parish council rep, Mrs. Davies, who wishes to speak. Mrs. Karen Darville, is she speaking, or are you perchance reading out her statement?
Chairman, Karen Darville is here with us, so she is going to make her own statement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. In that case, Mrs. Darville, you're not on my screen, but if you're there, please feel free to start.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council in objection to this application, and I'd like to concentrate on 3 aspects: the residency on site, the closed period, and the suitability of caravans for all year-round use. Recent planning decisions have maintained the closed period because Tarn Park is not considered appropriate for permanent residential use. It's licensed for holiday use only, a use defined by East Riding District Council as an extended period of recreation away from home. In line with the NPPF, a priority for the LPA should be preventing unpermitted residency from causing undue pressure on local services. Yet the planning condition proposed here, holiday use, not sole or main residency, and a register is maintained, as proposed in this application, already applies to part of this site, yet permanent residency was identified as an issue almost 2 years ago. Park owners subsequently assured Environmental Health that the site has strict rules in place to prevent this. The site managers are responsible for making appropriate checks to ensure this does not happen, and were adamant they have no person or family living on site. Environmental Health concluded, as the owners are currently able to provide a register of main living addresses for all those on site, we have no further investigation. A significant revelation of the pandemic, however, is the number of people at Tarn Park who were unable to return to a primary residence when the park closed. According to Partingtons, their details have been passed to Craven Council. Environmental Health now acknowledges residency on site, and I'm told by site residents that some owners are now facing the terrible prospect of eviction. In addition to this, comments in support of this application indicate that the holiday rules at Tarn Park are really not properly understood. One person admits to a 4-year-long residency, hates moving out in the closed period, and would like to be allowed to stay on site for 12 months, even if it means paying council tax, it being easier to travel to run their business in Skipton. Another is in favour of all year opening, it being unfair to have to move out for 7 weeks. Another argues for being able to live in the caravans 12 months as first homes to benefit those who can't get a mortgage, and it being difficult to find and pay for alternative accommodation for the closed period when their caravan is the major residence. This evidence surely shows that Tarn Park already has a residency problem, even with a closed period, even with the same proposed planning condition already in place. Residency will presumably be even more difficult to enforce with an all year round opening period, particularly in view of the widely acknowledged under-resourced enforcement team, considered to be at half strength according to the recent findings of the Select Committee's working group. Turning to the suitability of the standard of caravans on site, although the planning inspector made absolutely no statement in favour of removing or not imposing conditions to limit the period of use, she did state, as a result of the non-permanent nature of the caravan units and the holiday occupancy restrictions, the standard of living conditions is not likely to be as high as it would be for a permanent dwelling. As the planning officer points out, evidence of unsuitability of a home's construction, particularly in the winter months, would be an exceptional reason why holiday occupancy should be limited to certain months of the year, and therefore a valid reason to reject this application. The planning officer's opinion is that there is no evidence of unsuitably constructed caravans on site. However, I'd like to ask the committee to inquire on what basis there is no evidence. I've asked residents whether their caravans meet the installation standard and been told some do not. With regard to the close period, the applicant points to a 32-year-old case law indicating having no close season. As recently as just 4 years ago, however, the National Caravan Council, the longest established trade body for the holiday home industry, states some park owners have opted to reduce the open season of their park to 9 months or so to discourage caravan owners from taking up residential occupation. And also, many parks have been granted permission to open 12 months a year, but it is more common to find 10 or 11-month licenses. With regard to the position in Craven of the 9 holiday sites presented to you as having 12-month opening, 2 do not, and 2 are touring sites. The 3 largest holiday home sites in Craven after Tarn Park account for over a third of all holiday home pitches, and none of those sites have all year round opening. Please consider carefully that recent planning decisions have sought to maintain the closed period at Tarn Park by reason of permanent residential use putting undue pressure on local services. This reason remains real and unchanged, but with the added established difficulties that there is already residency on site. The planning condition does not appear to be effective. Not all caravans are of the standard for all year round occupancy, and it is more common to find 10 or 11-month licenses than all year round, a factor that applies in Craven. Thank you for considering those elements.
Thank you for that contribution, Mrs. Darville. I believe we have nobody speaking on behalf of the objectors, Mrs. Davies. And with
that's
applicants
correct.
or applicants' agents not wish to speak either.
No, Chairman, that's correct.
So the next person would be the ward councillor. If Simon Myers is somewhere up there, he's not on my screen. Is he in attendance, may I inquire?
He is in attendance, Chairman.
Lovely. Well,
He's had his hair cut specially.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, well, snap, you know.
I look a bit less bush.
Right. Well, you're speaking as a ward rep, so
I am.
Talk for as long as you like.
Well, the wonderful thing about having very eloquent parish councillors in one's parish, that they put things very succinctly and powerfully, and they rather rob the ward councillor of speech and good points. But the last time I addressed the committee on one of these was one of the Gargrave ones, and I remember well that meeting because it was undoubtedly the question that this committee was minded to refuse the extension for very much the reasons that Mrs. Darville has put forward. And it was the chief planning officer, after the debate, after the ward member had spoken, after the parish council representative, Robert Marshall, a former solicitor for Manchester City Council, had spoken, that the chief planning officer brought out of the hat the fact on appeal you would undoubtedly be overturned because this is what the inspector thinks. And I know that Robert Marshall corresponded with the chief planning officer after that meeting. Had Gargrave Parish Council had money to throw away, they might well have judicially reviewed that decision on the basis that the advice given was erroneous. And there are plenty of instances where the planning inspectorate have upheld the restrictions as a means for district councils and local authorities have some control over the use of what are holiday sites which would have never been given planning permission without restrictions on occupancy, and which are being used as permanent substandard residences. And what COVID-19 has revealed in this case is that at least 18 people on that site have nowhere else to go. And the real figure for people who use it as a permanent resident is probably 2 or 3 times that. Those are people who couldn't go and stay with parents or grandparents like they do for the 6-week period when it's closed. There are people on that site. There's one gentleman who commented that he had let his house 16 years ago to tenants who'd been there ever since, and that he couldn't kick them out. So that's somebody who's been living there for 16 years, apart from during the closed period. Mrs. Darvel has said to you that repeatedly in the past, when there have been applications to extend this site, planning officers in their report commented on the fact that we can have some comfort that it will not become a permanent residential site because of the closed period. And lo and behold, now you're asked to remove that safeguard. It is the only safeguard we have, because over the last 2 years, certainly Thornby Parish Council and myself, during the course of planning applications and so on, have corresponded with planning enforcement and with environmental health, and have repeatedly been told that Artingtons have in place a system of registration and of checks, and that there was no evidence that anybody was living there in breach of the terms of the license. And we now know that at least 18 people have been living there in breach of the license. And that position persists today as you consider this application. It has not been put right. And we seem to have agreed that they can give these people till July next year to regularise them. So at the moment, Partingtons, the applicants, are in breach of their licence, and they're asking you to vary it to accommodate them. And social media is full of praise for this, for you want to live there for 12 months of the year and have no other residence. Support from some of the caravan owners. There is no support from other caravan owners who think that Partingtons will use it simply to hike the fees. So there are 2 considerations really. One is whether we hang on to a safeguard that we have in circumstances where the applicants are already in breach, and we want our officers to enforce our policies, license. But they haven't done it today is no excuse for them not doing it in the future. The second consideration is whether we are in control as a planning authority, licensing authority, of what happens in open countryside. Are we going to allow people to create substandard housing for people that the expenditure of which for them is on site fees, and put the drain on the resources of the tax-paying residents of Craven because they don't pay council tax? Now, there are 18 people we know of living at Calm Park, I mean, absolutely indisputably in breach of the licence, who are not paying council tax. And I suspect there are 2 or 3 as many as that. 30 people not paying council tax on one site in Craven is the equivalent cost to the council of the maximum increase in the council that we can legally pass here. And that puts pressure on our schools, on our doctors' surgeries, on all our scant resources that post-COVID particularly we're going to be stretched to provide services. I know how concerned many of you are about proposed house building, particularly in Skipton, and the lack of new services that are being provided to accommodate that. And at the moment, we are allowing this to happen by the back door on caravan sites all over Craven, because if it's true at Tarn Park, it's true at Gallowby, it's definitely true at Gallowby, it's true all over Craven. Councillors from all over the parts of Craven will have anecdotal knowledge of the breach. And so what do we do as a council to say that we don't find this acceptable? Do we simply go along because possibly an inspector will think that it's wrong for a council democratically elected to have control of the patch? Not. My submission to you is that it's perfectly reasonable for this council to continue to impose a condition that was imposed at the very outset of a greenfield development, because we know that without those conditions, we have very little ability to stop breaches, and particularly in this case, where the applicant is currently in breach, with the cost to the environment, to our services, the other of Skipton and Craven, but also because we're allowing people to live in housing permanently that we wouldn't give planning permission for, permanent residences. Wouldn't allow people to live in such substandard full time. It's all right to be a holiday, but it's not all right. So members, I simply say to you, it's a matter for you. There are conditions that you can impose, and it may be that some of you have ideas about that. And Mrs. Darville's, I think in writing, suggested more strenuous ones from the National Campaign Council than those proposed by our office. So if you were minded to grant the application, you might want to make strict requirements on them to ensure that people aren't living there permanently or using them as residences. But the problem is that nothing historically suggests to you that Partingtons are capable or wish to have people permanently, because in the past we not, and that they keep a system and it's all very well regulated. And the reality is that they have been in breach for donkey's years, and no doubt it's true. So really, members, I think it's for the council to say what its policies are on its patch, and let's see what an inspector makes of it. I'm sure we can conduct a very vigorous defence of this on appeal if it goes to for the very reasons I've outlined. And the fact that somebody might want to go and stay in a caravan in North Yorkshire in January, when most of us are praying for the opportunity where the sun shines, is neither here nor there. The current situation is Tarn Park pays some £1,000 a year in business, which of course they charge their residents £4,000 or so a year in site fees, and we're losing possibly 18, possibly 30, possibly £40,000 a year in to provide essential services. I'd like an inspector who had the moral high ground. It was. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Myers. We'll now move to the debate. And of course, I'm wearing two hats here, Chairman of the committee, but I also happen to be the other councillor for Gargrave Ward. And at this point in time, I intend to speak in that capacity. It doesn't surprise me, the recommendation that we've had before us today, because from a brief look at the situation, government policy is quite clear, and that there are an abundance of other sites which are claiming in this report to enjoy the right to remain open for 12 months of the year. That seems to be a bit questionable, and one factor which I'm surprised hasn't been mentioned, no disrespect to either of the last two speakers, but this caravan site to some extent is unique in so much that it has Skipton on its doorstep. Now, people in Manchester will say, oh yes, we have a holiday home up in Skipton. Well, actually, it's not in Skipton, it's just outside. And those people, to make the point which Councillor Myers made, are availing themselves of the retail offer, the ambience, and to some extent the job opportunities, I suspect, in Skipton, free of charge. Planning inspectors, I'm informed, are these days taking the view that the standard of interior appointment of some of these caravans is equivalent to that of a permanent, traditionally built residence. If that's the case, why aren't we subjecting them to council tax if they enjoy that status? I think that the one message which has come over very clearly in the last two speakers' presentations, and I would compliment them on the points they've made, is that Partington Caravans have long since lost control of this situation if they ever had any serious intention of implementing it in the first place. There has evidence been presented that reasons have been put forward, and in some cases there appears to be no reason, as far as I know, for people in residence in those vans in violation of the licence at this point in time. I have to say, therefore, that I seek no comfort from the condition in response to the proposal to approve the application, saying that the situation is monitored by a requirement to keep a log of information from potential purchasers of vans. I suspect that Partingtons will go through the motions of recording what information is offered to them, but it's a bit like the information that's offered to us in planning applications. There's not incumbent on them to query it or to in any way challenge the authenticity and the accuracy of the information they collect. They simply pass that information on to Craven District Council at the appropriate frequency, and then it becomes a further cost to us in terms of enforcement by environmental health. And I think that the present situation, both in terms of the way it's been monitored by the council and the way it's been collated by Partington's Caravan, is less than satisfactory, and it imbues me with no confidence that the situation is going to improve in the future. On that basis, I have to say reluctantly myself that I do think that we should on this occasion think twice before we approve this application. And if, you know, my own personal thoughts at the present time are that we shouldn't support the recommendation. That's a purely personal view. Other members of the committee may have different views, and at this point in time, I would welcome contributions from other members of the committee. So it's open to debate if anybody wishes to speak. I've got some people down here. What for already? Councillor Pringle, I think you were the first to put a hand up electronically. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We've heard three very eloquent speakers. They've all said the same thing. I know this site well. There are log cabins on it that are basically permanent homes. I nearly bought one myself. We are in danger of allowing permanent homes in the countryside without charging. I think that if there's worries about us defending an appeal, I think Councillor Myers and Mrs. Darvell could give plenty of good planning reasons why they down. And so I'm going to make the first move without saying too much more, and I am going to propose that we turn down this application to extend the period to 12 months. It's not something to do with COVID, as it says in the report. If we give people permission to live here 12 months of the year, we will have even more of a housing estate in our countryside where the people do not have to pay council tax. Sadly, Councillor Myers' figures didn't come across, but I think I know what he was saying. Basically, there's big site rents, people pay £500 a month, as well as paying £100,000 for a lodge, and Partingtons are basically charging council tax and not passing it on to the council. I would like to propose that we do not extend the period. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. Hopefully we've got three more speakers here, so perhaps one of them will second your motion. Councillor Brockbank, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I want to refer back to Ms. Darvall, who, from the Parish Council, who referred to figure 1, which is the list of the caravan parks, and that is incorrect. I can confirm that I know of at least one of those caravan parks, and that it does not have 12-month occupancy, but we did have some late information this morning. I just want to bring that to everybody's attention. There was some late information this morning that said that part of the site, only part of the site, is 12 monthly. But I do agree that at least one of the caravan parks that I know of is a touring site, and I would question whether or not it is sensible to compare a touring site with a very small touring site with apparently 12-month occupancy. I haven't been able to verify that with the site owner, but I'm not aware that it's 12 monthly, and it is news to me that it's 12 monthly. That is a touring site only, and it is not comparable with Partington's site. Landcliffe Park, that has 12-month occupancy. Again, to back up what the Parish Council have said, that has 12-month occupancy, but those owners only open for 11 months, and that gives them a month to carry out maintenance. And that is at the owner's preference. There is, I won't list the other ones, but there are other caravan parks on there that I'm aware of that have residential misuse, as well as Partington's, at least 2. I do know for myself that there is misuse of this 12-monthly occupancy. I know it's been proposed for refusal, but can I say at this moment in time that if we are minded to approve this application, and also if we could add an informative, this is for Mr. Watson, if we could add an informative to the licensing committee, sorry, not the licensing committee, to the, I think it is, let me just check, I think it's environmental health, I think, who issue the site licenses. Yeah, it's environmental health who issue the site licenses, and informative to them. If you'd like to refer to the model condition at 9.5 in the officer's report, sorry, not 9.5, no, that's wrong, 9.15, 9.15, there is a recommended model condition. In that, it refers to holiday accommodation. I'd like to tie that down a little bit stronger, again, just in case that we were minded to approve this, but also maybe it's something that we could pass on in an informative, and that is that the documents that are used by the site owner to check whether or not the occupant of the caravan has a permanent residency elsewhere, and that would be to tie that down to the council tax bill plus a photo driving license is the evidence that is used to prove that they have residency, a main residence elsewhere. That would because using utility bills, which I think is what could have been used in the past anyone can have a utility bill registered in their name at somebody else's address. And I have checked with Environmental Health this morning to ask them what evidence they use, and I quote, they say that that they're not aware that they do stipulate what types of documents up to now, but agree with the point about it being a council tax bill and a driving licence, and they are going to look at that. And I think that will go some way towards helping this problem of that we've got of these breaches of these 12 months occupancies, holiday occupancy. I think there are plenty of residential sites in and around Craven. So if somebody wants to live on a residential site, why in a caravan, sorry, they don't need to live on in a holiday site, They can go and live on a residential site. And quite a few sites in Craven have mixed. They have residents and they have holiday sites and tourers in with that as well. So it's not that that isn't available to them. We know that.
Are you saying, may I inquire, that the situation Councillor Brockbank would be acceptable if these amendments could be made to the documentation required?
What I'm saying is, if we are minded to approve this application, that, and I don't know if we can put it in, if we refuse it, I don't think we can. I don't know what situation is there, but let's say, for example, we approve this application today, or indeed if we refuse it and it goes to appeal, then I think this, then I'd like to see this council tax bill and photo driving licence as their ID. And as I say, I don't know how we do that, whether we can, if we pass this application, we could put it into the recommended model condition. If we refuse it, then I don't know what we can do, whether it can be done as an informative to environmental health from the planning committee, because quite a few people have raised concerns about this 12-month occupancy and breaches of it. I'll have to ask. I'll have to.
If we're minded to refuse it, Councillor Brockbank, there won't be much point in refining the process in any way at all, would it? It'd be down to a planning inspector then, perhaps, to decide what would represent acceptable documentation. I think the first thing we have to decide is whether we're going to approve it or refuse it before we start looking at the nitty gritty.
Yeah. I think, let me just check. I think that's everything on that one. Yep, that's me on that one. I'll listen to the rest of the debate before I make my decision.
Well, thank you for your contribution. We've had 4 speakers now, so maybe it's time to bring Mr. Watson in and see if he wishes to respond to any of the presentations that have been made, including, of course, my own. Mr. Watson.
If I could just come back on a couple of points. I think members, I understand the points that members are making, but I think you're mixing enforcement and site licensing with the determinant of this application, because this application is before you. It's not to say what enforcement action may be necessary, should have been necessary, or what is affected by the site license. And on that basis, I would urge members to exercise some caution to think that any enforcement issues are a justification for refusing an application, because the planning legislation and the National Planning Policy Framework and Planning Practice Guide is not to use enforcement as, or lack of enforcement as a reason for refusing an application. I'll listen to the rest of the debate and will happily comment on anything members put forward. But I do have some reservations about, having heard the debate thus far, on what grounds you're actually going to refuse it. Thank you, Chairman.
you for that contribution. I've got some more blue hands up here. Councillor Brown, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, obviously we have to consider this application on its own merits, but I think we also have to be aware that if this condition is allowed with conditions on this occasion, it's become really effectively a policy that will apply to other sites, because it'd be extraordinarily difficult to refuse anybody else on the same basis. So we've got to consider what our policy is about providing affordable homes. Is it our intention that we want people living on sites that are fixed? And I don't think it is our intention. So if we do go through with this, we'd have to think in a different context about our policy on things like council tax. Should we be collecting council tax from caravan sites in a different way on different conditions? Should we be changing the second home policy on council tax if we have the power to do so? Personally, I don't think we want to make our affordable housing policy to be that we allow some people to stay in fixed caravans. And I think the reason why we should be rejecting this is it's reasonable to say that touring caravan sites should be open all year. So I think we're all fine with that, and we understand why the appeal people have put that condition, said that's okay. It's not reasonable that fixed ones should have no period of closure for maintenance, no period of closure at all in the year. And I think we've seen that the conditions that we're seeking to impose can't be enforced. And we've often heard from lawyers and from planning officers that we can't impose a condition if we can't enforce it. We've just heard evidence that we failed pretty miserably to enforce the condition, to the point where 18 people couldn't leave the site during COVID when it was illegal to be there, and really struggled to find other alternative accommodation. So I think we have to ask ourselves, well, even if we imposed Councillor Brockman's tougher condition, which I think was a very sensible attempt to say you should at least prove you've paid your council tax somewhere else and prove who you are, but even that condition is problematic, because should I own a property in, let's say, Liverpool, and like living in Skipton, all I would need to do would be to rent out my property in Liverpool to people who didn't pay, who paid their water rates via their or their energy bills via their rent, and I would then have proof that I'd paid a utility bill. If I paid the council tax on that property, I'd have proof I'd paid the council tax, and I could then live in Skipton comfortably all year round using the income I'd collected from my property in Liverpool. So it's a completely unenforceable condition, and we've been told endlessly we can't put unenforceable conditions on applications. So I think I'm left with no alternative but to second the proposal to reject it.
Thank you very much. Now the next one on this, Councillor Welch. I think you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just go by my own personal experiences, and I'll give you a classic example, having been on the National Park Planning Committee for 11 years. And going back several years ago, we kept getting these applications in to extend it for 12 months. For many reasons, the committee turned them down, etc., etc. And then there was a relevant court case. I don't know if it was Kettlewell or somewhere not all that far away, with a judicial review. And they said that basically people should be entitled to go any time of the year they want, i.e. Christmas or whenever, to stop in accommodation. Now, bearing in mind that every single application that's to do with the caravan site always goes to the National Park Planning Committee, that's one of their policies. And after that, we're inundated with similar applications. And there were very short and brief discussions, because it was always presented to us that due to the change of government legislation, caravan sites could open for 12 months if they want. If we turned it down, we wouldn't have a cat and mouse chance on appeal. So consequently, they were very short meetings, and a lot of the caravan sites in the national park took advantage of it. I mean, I know some that don't. They are quite happy with the 10 months because they get all the maintenance work done, etc., etc. But that's their particular choice. But yet, I'm not taking sides on this. I think a lot of the debate has been looking at the wrong way about going about things. So I would like, my question would be to ask to Head of Planning and Regeneration, Mr. Watson, am I right in saying that if this planning committee turned it down and they went to appeal, we will be just in the same situation that other caravan sites have been done in the national park? I presume we're all under the same government and guidelines, and that it would be reasonable to assume that if it went to appeal for whatever reasons at all, then we would probably lose it and possibly award it for costs, bearing in mind that what has happened with previous applications on previous sites in North Yorkshire. Could I have an answer off that, off Neville, please?
Yes, I'll refer to Mr. Watson in a second, but of course the National Park does operate a different set of rules from ourselves. But anyway, Mr. Watson, if you can comment on that issue, please.
Chairman, I'll happily come back on that point. Councillor Welsh is quite right. The likelihood of a successful appeal is remote. I haven't actually heard yet on what grounds you were attempting to do it. What I am concerned about is that you're referring to affordable housing and 12-month occupation. This has got nothing to do with affordable housing policies. This is a proposal just to allow holiday occupancy in any time 12 months. The issue of enforcement is one that is very much uppermost in my mind, and I will work with the environmental health colleagues to ensure the enforcement of the appropriate site licence conditions. But I actually haven't heard at this stage anything that would give me grounds for thinking we would stand any chance of winning on appeal. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the present situation, but it would be incumbent on the proposer and seconder of the motion before we went to a vote to come up with some reasons for appeal for you to pass comment on. Mr. Strickland, you're the next blue hand I've got.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to underline really what the planning manager has said. I think there's two issues. There's the obvious enforcement issues that members have referred to, which is obviously a concern for members, but I think that is a separate matter to the question of determining this planning application. The fact that there may be enforcement issues both on the planning permission and on the site licence will not of itself give members a defendable reason at appeal to actually turn this down. So I think members need to be careful on it. The other point which I would just make is in respect of enforcement. The planning manager has indicated that it's obviously a matter which needs to be looked at. I think members have been very clear in their comments this afternoon that it is an issue that needs to be looked at. There is a process by which the site licence and the conditions on the site licence can be enforced. There is a process whereby the site owner can be prosecuted in respect of that, and if they are prosecuted and there are convictions under that site licence, an application may be made to the court for the site licence to be revoked. So there's a clear enforcement avenue on the site licence, and there are other enforcement avenues in respect of the planning permission that can be enforced in the usual way. So I would just caution members that the fact that there may be enforcement issues does not of itself provide a legitimate planning reason to turn this application down that the council could defend on appeal. Just wish to make members aware of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your contribution there, but it interests me when you say that there is a process available for enforcement. Some people would say if that process has been available and if they've been violating the site licence for the periods of time that Councillor Myers has referred to, why hasn't Craven District Council taken action already?
Chairman, I entirely appreciate that point and I understand it, but that of itself does not give the council a right that it could defend at appeal.
No,
But I take the point. I take the point you make.
I hear where you're coming from, but one of my main concerns here is that the situation is obviously not under control at present, and that doesn't really imbue me with any confidence to allow them a further period of time in which to conduct themselves perhaps in the same manner. I don't know. Councillor Pringle, you're next.
I honestly don't think Councillor Brown could have put it any clearer, and our chairman's just sort of backed up what he said. We are not allowed to impose a condition that is unenforceable. The condition that is proposed is unenforceable. There are people basically living there. I am nearly one of those people. There are some substantial log cabins as well as some substandard caravans. People actually live there. We are in danger. Look at section 2. It says, section 2.3 in the report, it says that the reason we don't want people living there all year is because the site is in an isolated location and it's not considered appropriate for permanent residential use. We seem to be getting lost between what's holiday use, and somebody comes for 2 weeks, and I think nearly every member in front of me is happy for that to happen on various sites. This is a whole different issue. This is people who live there. Thank you. So Councillor Brown, if you write down what he said earlier, he's given you perfect planning reasons. Please do not try and frighten the committee with the threat of costs. We will only lose costs if we are wholly unreasonable. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. We have, of course, already been done for costs by this particular applicant on a previous application, but I take
Can I come back on that, please?
No.
The only reason we were done for costs is because we did not offer a defence. Read the document. We did not offer a defence, and so we lost costs. It's probably appropriate to ask somebody who wants to approve this to actually create the defence, because if your heart's not in it, you're probably the wrong person to be doing the job. I'm sure I can see 4 or 5 people on this screen who are more than capable of producing a perfect defence, which may lose. It may lose.
Right.
Chances of it
I'll stop you there
losing
because we're digressing here, and I was present at the appeal, and I can't support what you're contesting at the present time, but that is something, a situation which may or may not be in front of us anyway, so perhaps there's no mileage in discussing it in detail in the determination of this application. Councillor Brockbank. Councillor Brockbank, I've got a blue hand up from you here.
Yes, I was just trying to find my mute button. It's on my other screen. Thank you for letting me come in again. It's just regarding the council tax bill and that not being any more help to enforcement than anything else. And I don't want to go into enforcement because that's not what we're about today. But I want to say that we are in danger of using the planning system to control what is an enforcement issue. But really, I think we should be, as councillors, we should be looking at our enforcement team. And it did concern me when Ms Darville said that it was only at half strength. That is a concern. I think that's something that we as councillors should be looking at anyway. But the one thing to note is that if somebody does not have a permanent home, and if you're paying council tax, or if you're saying you're paying council tax, or you are listed on a council tax bill, that is your home, well then the site owner has got somewhere to send you. You're not homeless. If you're not listed anywhere on a council tax bill, then you're technically homeless. That's my understanding of it. I'm sure Alex will be able to will be able to tell us what the legal position is. And we all know, of course, that if somebody is homeless, then they become the problem of Craven District Council. But as I say, that's really just to come back to Councillor Pringle about my my suggestion of the condition.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. But I don't think that, you know, the enforcement and matters of that really are what we're here for this afternoon. Our role this afternoon is to say yes or no to a planning application in front of us. Councillor Brown, you seem to be the only blue hand winking at me at present.
But surely a green hand winking at you.
Oh, of course, yeah. You have to get them to change the colour on the programme.
Yeah, I'll see if we can do that. Yeah, just a couple of things. Firstly, on the appeal, I think the reason we lost the appeal is because this committee gave 3 separate reasons for turning it down on 3 separate meetings, and the inconsistency between them, I wasn't entirely surprised. The appeal.
Sorry, I hear what you say, but really we're not here to explain.
No,
the appeal went wrong.
When it comes to the actual reasons for turning it down, I think basically the local plan does not designate this as a residential site. I think what we're all saying is in our judgment, this isn't an application for a holiday homes for 12 months. It's an application to regularise part of those holiday homes being permanent residence. Now, I can see Neville shaking his head, and he's probably right. You know, I don't know whether we can justifiably say the application before us doesn't do, in our opinion, what it says on the tin. It might be reasonable in the appeal court people to say that 12 months for holidays is fine, but this doesn't seem to us in our judgment to be for holidays. It seems to be partially for residential, and this isn't a residential site. So therefore I think we should be able to turn it down on the grounds it doesn't do what it says on the tin.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Welsh, and then I think we need to look about perhaps going to a vote, and I would ask the proposer and seconder in the meantime to give some thoughts as to what reasons you could give to Mr Watson if the decision went that way. Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Chairman. First, let me say I have no problem with this application at all on the legality of it. A lot of people have a problem with them being moralistic or whatever about it. But you've got to look at it. I mean, there's a lot of caravan sites around where I live. I know people that live there for 9 months of the year, and then they go to Benidorm somewhere for 3 months. Wouldn't be my choice.
Bit difficult at present.
But are they actually doing anything illegal? That's the whole point. They might spend 1 month in the caravan, or they might spend 12 months. At the moment, all right, yes, I didn't phrase that very well. They might spend one month or 9 or 10, but that's people's lifestyle. If they so wish to do it, then you know that's their choice. Who are we to criticise? I mean, I realise we've got to look for as many planning reasons as possible to reject this, but my main concern is the credibility of how this council would stand if we turn it down with spurious reasons. I've no, like I said before, I have no particular views either way, but you've got to look at it from a practical point of view. Are they actually doing any harm? They might not be paying any council tax, but thousands of people all over the country don't. The people where there's more than one household, they're only paying 25%. Yes, it's wrong and moralistically wrong and everything else, but is their lifestyle actually illegal and enforceable? And unfortunately, from what I've had so far, I'm afraid it isn't. I mean, I shall see what the reasons people come up with for refusal. It'd be quite interesting, but I just think that unless it's got to be something really material reasons, then I think we'll struggle. And my concern is the credibility of the council coming to decisions that it's likely to make. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I've got Mr Strickland wishing to speak, and then I will ask the proposer and seconder to come forward with their reasons for refusal. Right, quickly, please, Alex.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to remind members again that they need to consider the application that is in front of them. The enforcement issues do not actually bear on the application that is in front of them, and members need to be very, very careful in terms of the reasons. I know the reasons haven't been given yet, but on the debate, it seems unlikely to me that members have put forward a reason that would be defendable at appeal, but the planning manager will no doubt wish to comment further on that. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, he won't have to wait long because I'm going to ask Councillor Pringle now as the proposer to give us his preferred reasons for refusal to substantiate any such action.
Well, I've already given them to you. If you go to 2.3,
Can you say it slowly so that Councillor Watson can, Mr. Watson can follow you through?
If you go to 2.3, the planning officer noted the previous approval in 2016 had condition 3 restricting occupation of part of the site, and it said no caravan on the site shall be occupied during the period 15th of December in any 1 year to the 6th of February the following year. And the reason for that was the site is in an isolated location and thus is not considered appropriate for permanent residential use. There's a massive difference between permanent residential use and a touring site, as Councillor Brown and many other councillors have alluded to. Councillor Brown has given you a perfectly good reason. A planning condition has to meet 6 tests, and one of them is enforceability. We have a consistent record of being unable to enforce this, and as Councillor Brown said, if the man is minded to rent out his house in Liverpool on the basis that he pays the bills, he'll be able to come back and circumnavigate the proposals that we're making as to how we're going to check that he's got another resident. It is an enforceable condition.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown may have something to add.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Brown will give us his reasons in a minute when I call on him to speak. Those are your reasons at the present time. Right, Councillor Brown, and then we'll ask Mr. Watson to comment on your joint suggestions.
Not a designated site in the local plan, and the enforcement condition about it being a holiday home is not enforceable.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Watson, there are 3 reasons for refusal there. Can I now ask you if you are comfortable with those 3 in the event of the committee refusing the application?
Chairman, I cannot go along with it not being a designated site in the local plan. The reason being for that is that it is an existing caravan site. It doesn't need to be allocated in the local plan, it exists. So you can't refuse it on it not being an allocated site.
An allocated site for housing is the wording I'm using.
But this isn't an application for housing. This is an application to allow holiday accommodation to be used 12 months a year. It's not an application for housing. It's not an application for affordable housing. It doesn't.
Hence my second condition point, which is a non-enforceable condition.
It is an enforceable condition. It's the model condition that the planning inspectorate use. And the issue with enforceability is one of, you're extrapolating this and multiplying the effect. If you ended up with a situation where there was someone, so you have the restrictions that apply at the moment. So it's a closed season between the 15th of December and the 6th of February. And I think, as Councillor Wells pointed out, somebody goes to Benidorm for 6 weeks. The issue of enforceability remains the same, whether it's an 11-month season or a 12-month season. If someone is abusing that and the site owners are allowing that abuse to take place, someone could occupy that caravan for 11 months, clear off to somewhere else for the closed season, and on that basis they would end up saying, well, you've complied with the condition. No, they haven't complied with the condition because they're not using it for holiday use. Whether or not you end up with a debate and argument that, well, who's to say that I can't go on an 11-month holiday, that's a separate issue. But the abuse of and and conflict with a site license is one of enforceability, not one that you can refuse a planning application on. So I'm afraid the non-designation in the local plan, I'm afraid, just cannot be used. The enforceability is one where that is down to the local planning authority and the local licensing authority, because we've got two arms to this. We're not just simply the planning authority, we're not simply the licensing authority. We've got two strings to this, and we will enforce those conditions. The breaches that have taken place need to be the subject of investigation. But what you can't do is refuse it on the basis that you believe that the abuse is going to take place, and you believe that what is being put on the table is not the application that is being made. You've got, as Alex Strickland has mentioned, you've got to deal with this application on its own merits. And I'm afraid the reasons that have been put forward, I've got to advise committee at this stage, I don't think can be substantiated at appeal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that contribution. You're obviously not happy with that, to Mr. Watson. Now I've got Councillor Morell wishing to speak, newcomer for the first time this afternoon, and then we'll go to a vote on at that point in time. Councillor Morell.
Chairman, I'd like to refer to page 4, if I could, of the report, paragraph 4, planning policy background, and the officer has highlighted several planning issues referring to the local plan: SD1, SD2, SP2, EC3, EC4. Now, I've just read the document, read what those conditions refer to. On here, I'm not going to read it out to members. I won't be so presumptuous to think that you don't know what these are. But EC4, if I could just refer to this one, EC4 tourism. Tourism will grow in a sustainable way so that it helps to improve the economy, environment, and quality of life. Clearly, what we're being presented with here does not do that. It does not meet that condition. I believe that is a firm condition that we could apply in this case. I also believe that SD1 is questionable, SD2 is questionable, and EC3 is questionable. Those are the planning policies that the officer who's written the report has pointed out as being supportive for this, and I would question that. Thank you. I hope that's helpful to the proposer and the seconder. Thank you.
You've raised another issue out of the blue here, and I'm going to go to the votes. And I think we've discussed this long enough. But Mr. Watson, would you like briefly to comment on Councillor Morell's contribution, please?
Chairman, those are the relevant and pertinent comments, and we wouldn't be recommending approval if the application was at variance with those conditions. So to cite those conditions as a reason for refusing an application is that's digging us deeper into trouble than we've already put on the table.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I think now we have given this a good airing. Mr. Strickland, is it a quick point before I go to a vote?
Yeah. Yes, indeed, Chairman. Again, I just wish to remind members that they have to be careful. I think that in terms of the reasons that have been outlined, for the record, I would not be confident that we could defend our position on appeal in light of the comments from the planning manager. And I would also be concerned that we would have a costs bill as a result of it. So I just wish to get that on the record for members, and they can obviously take it into account when they make the decision. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you for that comment. Members will obviously bear that in mind. So we'll now, if Mrs. Davis, if you're around, we'll go to a vote, which, seeing as how we're on Zoom, will have to be a recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's been proposed and seconded that we turn down the 12-month occupancy application, and the reasons given are set out in 2.3 of the officer's report about it being in an isolated location and thus not considered appropriate for permanent residential use. It's not an enforceable condition in relation to the having it as a holiday home, and it's not designated for housing in the local plan. That is what I've got down, Chairman. If you're happy with that, I'll
Yes,
do the
that's my
on-
understanding of the situation, so I'm
that.
happy to go to a vote on that basis, and we'll see how the cookie crumbles.
Okay, so I'll just call your name out, and if you could just let me know whether you're voting for it, against it, or abstaining. Chairman, can I come to you first, please, Councillor Sutcliffe?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Brockbank.
With regard to the unenforceable condition, I don't agree that. So I'm going to go against the refusal, because I think that the condition is enforceable. So, but I do agree with the 2.3. I agree with
Linda, we're
the
just voting now. We're not going back over.
I know, but I just want people to know that.
No, what all Vicar Davies wants to know is whether you're for or against the application, please.
Yes, but other people want to know why I'm against it, and that's why. So I'm against the refusal.
So you're against, okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
For refusal, but I'd want to speak to Councillor Brockbank's amendment if it's turned down.
Councillor Harbourham's not with us. Councillor Morell.
For.
Councillor Place.
Against.
Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Rose.
It is abstain.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
Has he lost his connection by any chance?
Councillor Shuttleworth, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Mrs Davis, yes. Unfortunately, due to an unstable internet connection, I've not been able to hear the full debate, and therefore I must abstain.
You're abstaining, thank you. Councillor Welsh.
Against.
Councillor Handley.
Against.
Councillor Soloway.
For.
Okay, thank you. I just add them up. Okay, for the recommendation proposed by Councillor Pringle and seconded by Councillor Brown, it was 4 votes for the amendment, 4 votes against the amendment, and 3 abstentions.
So where does that leave us then, Mrs Davis? And I abstained.
You abstained, yes. Alex, can I just
Councillor Walsh is smiling.
Chairman, just to clarify on this, my understanding was that the recommendation to refuse was put to the vote. there was 4 votes in favour of the refusal, 4 votes against the refusal, which means it's a dead heat, which means it's down to yourself, Chairman, to have a casting vote to decide what way it goes. Thank you.
I'm not prepared to use the casting vote. I abstained. I don't think it would be right to determine this on a casting vote of the chairman.
Chairman, can I just come in and offer some thoughts?
Please do.
Given that it is a split decision, 4 voting for refusal, 4 voting against and 3 abstentions, I'll take advice from Mrs Davies and Mr Strickland, but my only comment could be, or offer and suggestion to committee, is that I bring this application back to committee at the next meeting with a report which covers the reasons why members wanted to refuse the application, and you make a decision on that basis.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Mr Watson. I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know how other members feel about it, but do you think that's a sensible course of action, perhaps in view of the fact that we as a committee are split?
I think we probably need to vote on that, Chairman.
Yes, I know. That's what I'm thinking. Yes. Well, we better take a vote on that, haven't we, to put this to bed?
Councillor Brown has got his hand up wishing to speak, and also Councillor Brockbank.
Yeah.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Just to say that might be a reasonable way forward, but what I'd welcome is if the report came back to us with clearer conditions. I don't think Councillor Brockbank's point about spelling out the conditions about how we check on council tax payment should be lost. I think that a report that incorporated that might be helpful.
Okay, Councillor Brockbank, quickly please now. Are you happy with that proposal, Mr Watson's?
Well, what I was going to ask is if the proposer is prepared to amend their proposal, their reasons for the refusal, and whether that would make any difference to the way people vote. Oh,
I think it's too late for
Mr.
that.
Watson shaking his head, Councillor Sutcliffe. So
sorry, I think
Mr.
it's
Watson
too late for that, Mrs Davies, is it not?
Well, that would depend on whether Councillor Pringle was prepared to amend his recommendation, and then if Councillor Brown was happy to second that, we could go to another vote.
Oh, we're going around in circles here, but very briefly, Councillor Pringle.
Chairman, can I just jump in just to try and assist? I think that the proposal from the planning manager was a reasonable one in light of the fact that the committee is split, and you're not, for understandable reasons, in a position to determine this by way of the casting vote. I think it is entirely reasonable for this matter to be brought back to the next committee, and maybe members could just agree that by consent rather than it be put into the vote.
Right, can we agree that by consent, members? It seems reasonable to me. Any objections to agreeing it by consent? No. Is that good enough, Mrs Davies?
Well, Councillor Pringle's got his hand up wishing to speak, and obviously he was a seconder, so
Right,
Councillor
Pringle then.
Thank you. Very quickly, I have no problem with the suggestion, but I do not want a late information report 1 or 2 days before the next meeting. I would like it more than a week in advance, please. Thank you.
I think you're entitled to that. I think you can rest assured that will happen. Does that mean now that we are agreeing with Mr Watson's offer?
So yes, if that is to defer the item until the next meeting for clearer conditions to be included.
Yes, a comprehensive report submitted to the customary timetable, which is a week before the meeting. Okay, members, have we finally got there now then? It seems likely. Right, we're moving on now. Mr Watson, when you're ready, perhaps you can take us to Corder Lane, which is the application next on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a detached dwelling adjacent to High Caleb's Barn on Corder Lane at Skipton, and has been referred to committee by Councillor Heseltine. Chairman, you'll see from this drawing that the site location plan doesn't show you the relationship with this site to Skipton town itself, but I will provide you with a further slide further down the line. You'll see it's referred to in the committee report as a modest site, but actually it is actually quite large. It's the topography of the site that makes it with limited development potential. But nevertheless, when you look at the size of the curtilages to the other properties, that is quite a substantial site. This is a photograph from the lane looking up into the site, and the location of the proposed dwelling would be in this location to the left-hand side. This is a view from the top of the hill looking back down, and as I say, the dwelling would be in the location approximately outlined by the cursor. It's a rising site. You'll see the contours on it are such that there's a need for quite some substantial modelling, and this is for a single proposed dwelling. It visually from this angle looks like a single-storey bungalow, but the access arrangements in at this side, because of the topography of the site, is that this element is two-storey. This puts it into context in terms of the principle of development, because what you have is the main core of Skipton in this location here. And you'll see from that that is quite some considerable distance from the main settlement. So it's not part of the main built-up area. It's in an isolated site in the countryside. These are two photographs that have been in response to the advice from the Highway Authority, showing you what Corder Lane is like. And the conclusion from the Highway Authority is that it's incapable or shouldn't be used for additional traffic. This is the existing dwelling. You'll see very traditional in form. There's obviously a former farm building and range of outbuildings converted to residential use. And what is proposed is well, I'll say, as I explained to you earlier, a two-storey property from the access arrangement side, taking into account the topography of the site, but essentially it just appears as a very suburban bungalow. There is some hard surfacing to be created. There's removal of trees and removal of all existing vegetation on the site to seek development of it. Chairman, the site is in, as you'll see from that photograph, in a very remote, well, not remote might be being a little bit strong, but it is certainly not part of the main built-up area of Skipton, and therefore is countryside. And if you apply the policies in policy SP4 of the local plan, clearly there is no support for the application, and the clear recommendation, Chairman, is to refuse it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. On this occasion, we don't have a parish council or an objector up, but the applicant's agent, Mrs. Davis, has got down here is Ernest Calvin. And you're going to read his statement, I believe.
I am, Chairman, if that's okay. I'll just get it. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, okay, I'm going to start it now. Our aim is to build a two-bedroom bungalow that fits into a degree with climate change guidance, i.e. solar panels, tree planting and building construction. This would enable us to release a 5-bed property more suited to a family. There are no objections from any of our neighbours, and this construction is no bigger than the original approved plans in 1989 for the barn conversion without buildings, where only 30% have been built. With regard to the traffic junction, originally there were no problems. How can this now be a problem in the light of the planned new bridge? We await your decision. Yours sincerely, Ernest Calvert. That concludes the statement, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reading that out. In that case, then we move to the debate, but we do have the ward representative represented by Robert Heseltine couldn't come, so he's appointed as a substitute who presumably will speak in lieu of him at this point in time. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, fortuitous that the other South Ward councillor is actually sitting as a substitute on this particular application. I just very quickly, usually the residents of South Ward are very, very keen to their views over planning applications and have done before. But on this occasion, I've had no objections come to me from the wider community. I've no objections from local residents. The town council haven't objected. In fact, it goes the other way. The residents of this area were very vocal in their response to Craven District's consultation on the Border Road Bridge and came up with all kinds of views on it, which really did inform the debate that we had over that. Nearly 80 people turned up to that consultation, including most of the residents for this particular area. Okay. They also have represented to me that we're talking about this being out of development limits and on a hillside. Well, they often object the other way. They're objecting to light pollution coming from the other side of the Aire Valley. So, talking about the highways issues, well, there used to be a bit of a highways issue because North Yorkshire used to run somewhere called the Corder Gill, which is now closed. It's no longer a North Yorkshire facility, so the traffic there is not as much as it used to be when it was a North Yorkshire children's facility. And so the Corder Road junction is linked in really to the development of the bridge at the same time. So highways issues, to me as a ward councillor, are not as much the highways issues that are going to come out of the development of the bridge. So there's something else. It's very likely, however, that Corder Gill facility, the North Yorkshire facility, is very likely to develop for housing in the future anyway, which will cause way more highways problems than this one particular dwelling. So as one of the ward councillors, I don't actually have a problem with this. I think my residents would have let me know if they had a problem with it. I'm keen to hear other people's views on this, but as we're often told, we should take each application on its merits. And I'd like people to bear that one in mind when they're judging the town. Thank you, Chairman.
But you are speaking as a member of the planning committee, as well as a ward representative, is that right? So are you prepared to move anything then or not?
Well, I'd like to move approval.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll second it from the chair. Right, I've got Councillor Pringle. You seem to have hit the button first. It's like who wants to be a millionaire, isn't it? See how quick these blue hands come up. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you very much. This is a close one. I have no problem with the officer's report, but no objections. And basically, the guy has an extant permission to build a massive property on this site. And what he said is, I'd rather build a little bungalow. His neighbours have actually supported him. His alternative, if we turn it down, is to build a massive property on this site, sell up and move to a bungalow. But that all seems a bit daft. Please, please, please do not turn this down on highway grounds. We have 2 highway reports from the professional highwayman. The first one is dated the 13th of the 5th. It says there are no local highway objections to the proposed development. There is no impact on the highway. That's section 6.1 of the officer's report. Once Councillor Heseltine called this application before committee, it appears that we as a council went back to the highwayman and said, can you find a reason to turn it down? And he's come up with some reasons, saying it's a bad junction. Rest assured, it's not as bad as the junction that last week this committee passed at Engine Shed Lane. The visibility is 100 times better. And besides, he has an extant permission anyway. So on balance, and I know it's a fine one, I'm happy, well, somebody's moved it and seconded it, but I will be voting for this application. Thank you for your time.
The application is recommended for refusal, isn't it? And that's moved and seconded at the present time.
No, Andy Soloway is obviously confused because he recommended that we pass the application. I think we need
I think we perhaps need to resolve that confusion before we go any further. Councillor Soloway, can you clarify what your wishes and intentions were here?
I will clarify that. My proposal is that we, it's funny, we refuse to refuse. I'm a little bit of a novice on the planning committee. I have had the training. However, I don't sit on the planning committee very often. As ward rep and as a member of this planning committee, I think that we should approve this application and go against the officer recommendation.
Right, that's cleared up that point. In that case, my second is invalid because my interpretation was the other way. So you've recommended refusal of the officer's recommendation. Thank you. And Councillor Pringle's got his hand up again, so we'll see what he is about it. Councillor Pringle, very quickly, because I have two other members wishing to speak.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Now that confusion is sorted, I would like to second Councillor Soloway's proposal.
Thank you. That clarifies the situation. We're all singing off the same hymn sheet, hopefully. Now, right, Councillor Brown, you're next in the queue.
Story of my life, I'm singing off a different hymn sheet.
This one's a blue one, not a green one.
Yeah, whichever way around this case. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about this, and I don't have a strong emotions about it, but it seems to me that the local plan is very clear. If a development is in open countryside separated from the main settlement, there are a set of tests that the application has to pass in order for it to be acceptable. One of those tests is it an agricultural development? Designation for an agricultural worker? It's not. Another test is it of outstanding architectural merit? I don't think any of us could argue that's not a bad building, which is not in any way outstanding. I can't see anything in our local plan that gives us grounds to say yes to it. We've also got a highways report which says that the junction is dangerous, and I know I've driven down that junction and tried to look to the right to see traffic coming and almost been caught. It's a difficult junction to pull out on because you're looking back at a 70-degree or so angle trying to see the traffic coming. So I don't think we're not told many times that the highways are the expert people and we have to bow to the expertise of the highways. Now we're saying because the highways say no, we know more and can say yes. My third consideration is we put it down at 9.919. It's the only bit of the officer's report I disagree with, where it says it's a sustainable location. I don't think it is a sustainable location. You've got a 30-minute walk into town. The bus, the rare bus stop is about 15 minutes, certainly 10 minutes away. You've got to walk down to the main road to get to the bus stop. Going to Keighley and further they go on the other way. And I think it's almost certain it's going to increase car journeys because it's not in a sustainable location. So I think it's outside the main settlement block, so fails one of the critical tests in our local plan. And where are we, folks? If we pass a local plan 1 year and the next year, the first time something comes forward with an officer's report saying, I've read your local plan, I've looked at the tests in your local plan, it fails the first one, I've looked at the exceptions, it fails every one of the exceptions, and we say, oh, as a committee, we quite like this one. And actually, I have to be honest, I agree with the committee members that say quite like this one. I don't see a great problem with the actual house. And I do see the factor that it's got, had previous, but it fails our local plan, and we must say no.
I have to say I agree with you there. I think reason one for refusal just sums it up when it says the proposed development does not satisfy any of the circumstances for residential development in open countryside. And that has always been a very strong reason for refusing an application, even prior to the local plan days when it was alongside of policy ENV1. So I would concur with you. Right, Councillor Shuttleworth, I've got you down as the next speaker.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Quite frankly, I agree fully with the office. It's clear that this is a new build. It's outside the built-up area of Skipton, as shown in the local Craven local plan. I think that's the main difference. The conditions, if you like, of the local plan compared to previous history of proposals for this site. I've got to say I would be a lot more comfortable if it were a conversion of a non-residential building that were presently on site, but it isn't. It's a new build. And I shall, depending on how the first vote that was proposed by Councillor Solway goes, I shall propose, following the officer's recommendation, that the application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That does that leave me Councillor Morrell, the only other speaker.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I just concur with two previous speakers. This is clearly in open countryside. I think the report is absolutely spot on. Well done to Mr. Parkinson. And I can't support the proposal as it stands at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I would agree with that. Mr. Watson, do you wish to comment before we go to a vote? Because I've got no other speakers.
Chairman, I think you might find that Councillor Rose wanted to speak, but if I can just respond on a couple of points. I think that the point that Councillors Brown, Shuttleworth and Morell have come up with is exactly right. We've got a local plan. This is clearly in the countryside. It's a new development in the countryside. And the risk of you passing this is going to get thrown back at us to say, well, you approved it there. That's not the point. It's the fact that it is effectively, well, not effectively, it is very clearly in open countryside. And there's no point having local plan policies which very clearly set out what may be acceptable in the countryside and then saying, oh, well, this doesn't matter. Just a couple of very quick points, Chairman. I don't want to take up members' time much longer. If I can just explain the situation with there was a previous application submitted on this application that was withdrawn before it was determined. And the advice that we got from the Highway Authority would be one that the application should be refused on highway grounds. When we did the consultation on this application, initially, the Highway Authority came back and said, we've got no objections. So in the interests of consistency, the case officer went back to the Highway Authority and said, you recommended refusal of the application 2 years ago. Can you tell us what's changed to make the application now acceptable and that you've got no highway objections? To which the Highway Authority response was, oops, there appears to be an element of inconsistency here. We've reviewed the situation, and they went back to the highway reasons for refusal, which is what is in your report. So on that basis, Chairman, I would say that you shouldn't be making decisions on this site in the open countryside and simply saying it's acceptable. It's not. It's clearly contrary to the local plan. And on that basis, that's why the recommendation is to refuse the application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, you mentioned Councillor Rose. I've had no blue hand, Councillor Rose. Do you wish to speak before we vote?
I did wish to speak, thank you. I tried to draw your attention, but obviously I failed.
If I may just point out, alphabetical order, you're down off the bottom end of my list.
Thank you very much for that. I'll change my name. I do wish to support the comments made by Councillor Brown and those following Councillor Morell as well and Councillor Shuttleworth. We've got a local plan, we need to stick to it. And the whole issue of open countryside is one that crops up regularly. And if we're going to agree to have open countryside, we stick with it. And in my view, that area is certainly Open Countryside. I know it well, and I think it could well be, it is not, in my view, a suitable place to be adding yet another building. So I'm very happy to support refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that basis, Mrs. Davis. I can't see you. You must be somewhere up there at the top of my screen. Can we now go to a vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's been recommended for approval against officer recommendation by Councillor Soloway and seconded by Councillor Pringle. So we actually need to ask Councillor Soloway for the reasons why he wants to approve the application against
Officer advice.
recommendation. And then we can go to the vote. And we need to do that vote first before we go
Yes.
back to the.
Right, Councillor Soloway.
Thanks, Chairman. As I said, we always have this on planning committees where you take applications on their merits as well as through their policies. Like I said, as ward councillor, I have no problem either way with it. In a way, I proposed it for to go against officers' recommendation because I'm sort of slightly looking a bit to the future in the fact that there is very likely to be another development just slightly further down the road in Open Countryside that is going to have probably a much more significant effect on the locality. There is a huge housing development that is being built adjacent to this area on the other side behind Greatwood and Horse Close that is going to have a massive impact on the highways. Just the point that highways being inconsistent, perish the thought.
So, I think the ball stood in your court with respect, unless you wanted to change your recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, in light of what I've heard, actually, I mean, yes, I did propose it as a to go against the officer's recommendation, but actually, you're right. It does breach quite a lot of planning conditions. It does. I don't have a problem with the highway side of things because I think actually what the problem is there is going to be the highway situation. There is going to be way more exacerbated by housing developments that are in the local plan or recognised in the local plan than any of the development that's going to happen in the Open Countryside there. No, it's I recommended it for to go against officers' recommendation, but actually in light of it, maybe I'll withdraw that and we'll go for refusal.
Thank you. I'll second that from the chair then. Any other member wish to speak? All right, I think we're clear what we're voting on now, Mrs. Davies, if you could proceed with the recorded vote.
Okay, so Councillor Soloway, you're then withdrawing that previous, okay, and now you're happy to propose refusal of the officer recommendation for the reasons outlined in the report, and you are going to second that.
Yes.
Councillor Soloway. Okay, thank you. Just let me get my.
Chair, just to clarify, we're going to the vote on the officer recommendation, which is to refuse the application.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Morrell has now withdrawn his original one. He's come up with an alternative proposal, which I seconded. So let's get on with the vote, please.
Okay, Councillor Sutcliffe. You're voting for the officer's recommendation. Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Councillor Brockbank.
For officer's recommendation.
Councillor Brown.
For rejection.
Councillor Harbron. Sorry, he's not here, is he? Councillor Morrell.
4.
Councillor Place,
4.
Councillor Pringle.
I'm going to abstain, please.
Thank you. Councillor Rose,
For refusal.
Councillor Shuttleworth,
For refusal.
Councillor Welsh,
For refusal, excuse me.
Councillor Handley,
For refusal.
and Councillor Soloway.
Abstain, Chairman.
Okay. Pardon, you're abstaining? Oh, Councillor Soloway, you proposed it, didn't you? So that's fine.
Oh.
Okay. Yep. So that's 10. Approval for the officer recommendation to refuse the application as per the reasons set out in the officer's report, and
Thank you.
one abstention.
abstention.
Chairman. Thank you.
Right, so does that conclude business, Mrs. Davies?
Yes.
I just wanted to say a brief word. Remember, some members may know, some members may not know, but this is the last time that I will be chairing a planning committee meeting if things go according to plan at the council meeting on Wednesday night, because I will then become vice chairman of council with a view to becoming chairman of council in April of next year. That will be the last council, chairman of council, I think, for Craven District Council, because in 22, we're likely to have a new authority in place. In the meantime, Councillor Brockbank will be chairing the meetings. I think we are going to be operating a Zoom system for a long time to come, and I'm sure Councillor Brockbank is very confident and perhaps more into that than myself personally. So I will wish her the best of luck and just simply say that having been appointed in 2016, I've enjoyed my watch determining applications in what perhaps is now the old-fashioned way. In the meantime, my best wishes to all of the members that have supported me and to the chairman who will take over on Wednesday night, hopefully. Thank you.
Councillor Sutcliffe, can I just say thank you very much for your term of office, and all the best as vice chairman and going up to chairman as well. I think I think you'll enjoy it immensely, and I hope do as good a job as you have done.
Well, I'm sure you're better qualified to do it, bearing in mind the intricacies of Zoom, but anyway, not to worry. All the very best. Thank you.